Quick question. If I told you there's a virus out there with a death rate up to 40%, not 40 people out of a million, 40 out of every 100 who catch it, would you assume that's the scariest virus on the planet? Yeah, me too. That math is genuinely terrifying. 40% is basically a coin flip where tails means you're in serious trouble. Now here's the twist that's going to mess with your head a little. That virus has been quietly hanging out in rodent droppings for literally millions of years. It caused a real outbreak on a cruise ship in 2026 that killed 3 people, and yet, despite a fatality rate roughly 20 to 40 times higher than COVID-19, it has never caused a pandemic. Not once. Ever. So today we're asking the deeply nerdy but deeply important question: why doesn't the deadlier virus win? Why did the milder virus shut down the entire planet while this absolute murder machine just doesn't? Spoiler, the answer is going to change how you think about what dangerous actually means. Let's get into it. Okay, let's set the scene because this isn't hypothetical. This actually happened. In May 2026, a Dutch expedition cruise ship called the MV Hantavirus was sailing through the South Atlantic, stopping at places like Antarctica and a few remote islands you've definitely never heard of, with 147 passengers and crew from 23 countries. Sounds like a nice trip, right? Penguins, icebergs, maybe a nice glass of wine at sunset. Except somewhere along the way, one passenger picked up a virus called Is Hantavirus, a type of hantavirus, most likely from environmental exposure during a road trip through Argentina before he even boarded. He got sick. Then more people got sick. By the time health officials finished counting, there were 13 confirmed and probable cases. And here's the part that should make your eyebrows go up. 3 of those 13 people died. That's a fatality rate of roughly 23% on that ship alone. And severe hantavirus pulmonary syndrome more broadly can kill 25 to 40% of people who develop it. Compare that to COVID-19, which, depending on which point in the pandemic you're measuring, had a global fatality rate somewhere around 1 to 2%. So here's the puzzle. If you're purely ranking these 2 viruses by how likely is this to kill me if I catch it, hantavirus absolutely demolishes COVID-19. It's not even close. So why did COVID-19 become a once-in-a-century global catastrophe? While this cruise ship outbreak got contained, monitored, and quietly wrapped up within a couple of months. This is where most people's intuition about deadly viruses turns out to be almost completely backwards. Here's the concept that explains everything, and once you get it, you'll never think about outbreaks the same way again. A virus's danger to society isn't just about how deadly it is to one person. It's about how deadly it is to one person, multiplied by how easily it spreads to the next person. Think of it like this. Imagine 2 different ways a fire could threaten your neighborhood. Fire number 1 is a raging inferno. Anything it touches burns instantly and completely. But it only exists inside one fireplace in one house, and it cannot jump to anything outside that fireplace no matter what. Fire number 2 is a much gentler flame. It barely singes anything it touches, but it can leap from house to house, through open windows, carried on the wind, multiplying every time it lands somewhere new. Which fire burns down the neighborhood? Obviously fire number 2. Even though it's weaker per house, its ability to spread makes it infinitely more destructive at scale. That's the entire hantavirus versus COVID story in one metaphor. Hantavirus, specifically the Andes virus strain involved in that 2026 cruise outbreak, is genuinely one of the only hantaviruses on Earth capable of spreading between humans at all, and even then, it requires close, prolonged contact. We're talking about sharing a small enclosed cabin for days, caregiving without protection, that kind of sustained exposure. Most hantaviruses don't even do that much. The far more common form of hantavirus exposure, the kind found in the United States, caused by something like Sin-Nombre virus, comes almost exclusively from breathing in dust contaminated with the urine, droppings, or saliva of infected rodents, typically deer mice. You don't catch it from a coworker sneezing near you. You catch it from sweeping out a dusty old cabin that mice have been living in. COVID-19, meanwhile, is the absolute opposite design. It spreads through the air, from ordinary breathing and talking, sometimes from people who don't even feel sick yet. One infected person at a dinner party could plausibly infect everyone at that table without anyone realizing it was happening in real time. So you've got fire number 1, hantavirus, devastating to the household, but trapped largely inside rodent populations with only rare, difficult jumps to humans, and almost no jumps from human to human. And you've got fire number 2, COVID-19, comparatively gentler per individual case, but able to leap from person to person to person at exponential speed, crossing borders in days through ordinary air travel. Let's get into the actual numbers, because this is where the comparison gets genuinely wild. During the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, the virus infected an estimated several hundred million people worldwide, with confirmed deaths exceeding 7 million, and many epidemiologists believe the true death toll, accounting for underreporting, was significantly higher. With an average case fatality rate hovering around 1 to 2% globally, that lower percentage, applied to an enormous number of infections, produced a death toll in the millions. Now look at hantavirus pulmonary syndrome. In the United States, where Synnomber virus is the most common cause, there have been only a few thousand confirmed cases total since the disease was first identified in 1993. A few thousand, total, over more than 3 decades. Even with a fatality rate that can reach 38% in some outbreaks, the total death toll from hantavirus in the U.S. since its discovery numbers in the hundreds, not the millions. Do the actual multiplication, and the picture becomes almost absurd. COVID-19 has killed roughly 20,000 times more people than hantavirus pulmonary syndrome has, globally, across recorded history, despite hantavirus being, person for person, dramatically more lethal. There's a beautifully clean way researchers express this concept. A virus with a 100% fatality rate that only ever infects 10 people is, in terms of total harm to society, less dangerous than a virus with a 1% fatality rate that infects 100 million people. The math is not subtle. 10 deaths versus 1 million deaths. Fatality rate alone tells you almost nothing about the actual scale of danger to a population. The 2026 Is Hantavirus outbreak actually demonstrates this principle perfectly in miniature. Within weeks of the outbreak being identified, the World Health Organization, the CDC, and European health authorities had identified essentially every contact, traced the transmission chain back to a single index case, quarantined the exposed individuals, and confirmed that transmission required close, sustained contact rather than casual proximity. More than 600 contacts were identified across 32 countries, and the vast majority of them never developed any symptoms at all. The outbreak, while tragic for the families involved, simply could not propagate the way a respiratory virus like COVID-19 does, because its transmission mechanism fundamentally doesn't allow for it. Here's the insight that I think is genuinely one of the most important ideas in all of epidemiology, and it's something most people never learn. Evolution doesn't actually favor the deadliest virus. It favors the virus that spreads the most effectively, and being extremely deadly is often a competitive disadvantage for a virus, not an advantage. Think about it from the virus's perspective for a second, if a virus could have a perspective. A virus doesn't want to kill you. A virus wants to copy itself as many times as possible and get into as many new hosts as possible. Killing you quickly and dramatically is, from a purely evolutionary standpoint, often a wasted opportunity, because a dead host stops moving, stops breathing near other people, stops attending parties and using public transportation, and giving the virus new humans to infect. This is actually part of why Andes virus hasn't become the dominant hantavirus strain worldwide, despite its terrifying fatality rate. Its severity works against its spread. Symptoms hit hard and fast, people become extremely ill and are usually isolated and hospitalized relatively quickly, which closes off most opportunities for further transmission. The virus essentially burns through its own fuel supply before it can travel very far. COVID-19's genius, if you can call evolutionary success genius, was the opposite strategy entirely. Mild or even non-existent early symptoms meant infected people kept moving through the world completely unaware they were spreading it. The virus didn't need to be deadly to be devastating. It needed to be invisible and patient. Low lethality combined with high contagiousness turned out to be a far more effective strategy for global spread than high lethality with low contagiousness ever could be. This is the part that should genuinely unsettle you in the most fascinating way possible. The viruses we should fear most for pandemic potential are rarely the ones with the scariest individual death rates. They're the quiet, mild-seeming ones that don't make you feel sick enough to stay home. So what does this actually mean for you, sitting there, possibly now slightly worried about every mouse you've ever seen in a shed? First, practically speaking, hantavirus prevention is genuinely simple and doesn't require living in fear. The risk is almost entirely tied to specific environments: cabins, sheds, barns, and any enclosed space with signs of rodent activity. If you're cleaning out a dusty, long-closed space, ventilate it first, avoid stirring up dust by sweeping or vacuuming dry debris, and use appropriate protection like gloves and a mask when dealing with rodent droppings. That's it. That's the entire practical takeaway for 99% of people watching this. Second, and more broadly, the next time you see a headline about a new virus with a terrifying fatality rate, the question you should immediately ask isn't, how deadly is it? It's, how does it spread? A virus that requires direct, prolonged contact with infected rodent waste, or even direct, sustained contact with another sick human, is fundamentally limited in how far it can travel through a population, no matter how dangerous it is to any one individual. This reframing genuinely matters for how public health officials prioritize resources too. Outbreak response teams don't just ask, how many people could this kill per case? They ask, how many new infections does each infected person typically cause? A number epidemiologists call the reproduction number, or R0. A disease with a terrifyingly high fatality rate, but an R0 below 1 will fizzle out almost every time. A disease with a modest fatality rate, but an R0 above 3 or 4, can circle the entire globe within months. Understanding this distinction is, frankly, one of the most useful pieces of scientific literacy you can carry into any future outbreak news cycle, and there will be more outbreak news cycles. There always are. So let's go back to the question we started with. 40% fatality rate. Genuinely one of the scariest numbers you'll find attached to any human disease. And yet, in 2026, it killed 3 people on one ship, got contained within weeks, and never came close to threatening the broader world. Meanwhile, a virus with a fatality rate 1/20th the size reshaped the entire planet, closed borders, emptied cities, and changed how billions of people live, work, and think about breathing the same air as a stranger. The lesson here isn't that hantavirus is harmless. It absolutely is not. And if you ever develop fever and severe muscle aches after exposure to rodents, please, genuinely, go see a doctor immediately. The lesson is that our instinct to rank danger purely by how scary something sounds is one of the most consistently unreliable instincts we have. The quiet, modest-sounding threats are very often the ones reshaping history, while the loud, terrifying ones burn out in isolation, contained by the very ferocity that makes them so frightening in the first place. Maybe that's true beyond viruses, too. Maybe the things worth worrying about are rarely the ones screaming the loudest. So here's the question I'll leave you with. Now that you know the deadliest virus isn't necessarily the most dangerous one, what other scary number in your life might be measuring the wrong thing entirely? Like, subscribe, and comment. Did you know hantavirus was deadlier than COVID per case? Let us know what surprised you most.